Thank you to the choir. That was exquisite. And David and Jody, thank you as always. David, you're a genius, but you're such a nerd. I just love it. I couldn't follow a word you were saying, but I followed the music. Thank you. Tech team, thank you as always. Yvette she gave you a shout out last week, and you deserve a shout out every week because it takes a lot to put all this up on the screen. And to our ushers, thank you. And to all who make a service like this happen, thank you. And most of all, I think thank you to all you for showing up. I often wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and think to myself on a Sunday morning, what am I doing here? Because in a couple of hours, there are going to be a bunch of people who might want to hear what I have to say, or they might just come because this is their community and they love it, which is always the best reason to come to church. Let me read that poem again that Tracy did such a beautiful job with from Rilke. Just as the winged energy of delight carried you over many chasms early on, now raise the daringly imagined arches holding up the astonishing bridges. Miracle doesn't lie only in amazing living through and defeat of danger. Miracles become miracles in the clear achievement that is earned. To work with things is not hubris. When building the association beyond words, denser and denser the pattern becomes, being carried along is not enough. Take your well-disciplined strengths and stretch them between two opposing poles, because inside human beings is where God lives. The soaring imagery of Rilke's poem might strike some of you as fanciful and unrealistic, as much poetry does. After all, what Rilke was actually interested in is not what it's like to be in a rainstorm, but what it's like to be the rainstorm. Imagination, like memory, are powerful tools for us, particularly as people of faith in difficult times. Imagination is that story yet to become. And if we didn't have that, where would we be? Imagine the world as it could be. What would that look like? What piece of that imagined world sticks out for you? So I'm going to do something I haven't done in a little while. I'm going to invite you to turn to your neighbor and ask this question, discuss, what is the world I imagine? And we'll take about 3 minutes for this. It's a good thing you're not a friendly bunch. Let's hear a few answers. I've got ushers with microphones, so just raise your hand and let's share for just a second what some of the ideas were that you had. There we go. Ron in the back there.
I think John Lennon summed it up very well for me in his song Imagine.
I hear that was Jimmy Carter's favorite song too. Anybody else? Yep.
I wish for a world where we're more in sync with the natural world around us.
I'm going to be succinct, less lies, and more regard for each other.
I'll follow up on that. We were talking about somehow a world with fewer divisions, fewer groups that only talk to them, within the group and not at other ones. More community, and more sense of understanding the other person.
Perhaps a bit political, but a world that could elect Obama again.
If I could share, I was sharing with my colleague, I ended up imagining what would happen if the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs missed. I'll leave you with that thought.
I like that. More humor, and I like the golden rule a lot and what we might have heard in our childhood, in our idealistic families or beyond, and treat each other like family, and the golden rule.
Thank you. Maybe one more.
Well, Pam and I were just talking about Jimmy Carter and how he took the first steps and was always somebody who had so much character and a willingness to help others. And the fact that, I thought of the field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. And when he started the Habitat for Humanity, I think so much happened when people just turned up to hammer nails, and it grew and grew and grew. And that's a step toward a perfect world.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for your, one more? No, Amy. Nope, sorry, you got the microphone. Now you got to get up and say something.
I imagine a world that invests in healing.
All right. Rilke wrote, just as the winged energy of delight carried you over many chasms early on, now raised the daringly imagined arches, holding up the astonishing bridges. We now have the task of imagining the bridges to this world. I'd ask you to remember what it was like, if you can go back that far, to what it was like when you were a child. Imagination was and will always be our very best friend when it comes to seeing the world slightly better than the one we have. I've told you that when my younger brother arrived, I'd been in the house already 8 or 9 years, so I already thought I was an only child. So I had to make up a friend because, hey, you can't be all by yourself, and we lived way back in the woods. And I made up this friend, I called him Rocco. I have no idea why I called him Rocco. Perhaps I had a Rocco in my previous life, or perhaps it was because the small town in the Hudson River Valley I lived in was inhabited by Italian and Irish immigrants who came to build the Hudson River Rail line in sight of what was then the Tappan Zee Bridge, now the Mario Cuomo Bridge in Tarrytown, New York. Itself a reminder of the power of imagination. My imaginary friend was, and occasionally still is, my confidant, although most of that is now Francis, as it should be. I really shouldn't be walking around talking to myself all the time when I've got someone to talk to all the time. And in those early years, I tried to imagine myself as building cities and flying airplanes and creating a better world. Like the child in the story, all the things that I thought I could do. imaginary wings over the chasms of reality that too often weigh us down as adults. I think my entire ministry with you these last year and a half has been about reawakening the dream that is within you, the dream that is already here, the dream that you dream more often than you perhaps talk about it, but by coming together as community, you dream something that is still to be. Together, friends, we have to build these bridges across the range of our lives and our feelings, each side balanced by the other, and we need those astonishing bridges now more than ever. And for what once for us perhaps was the dark abyss of the power of the world, as children we never really understood how it all worked. There were the uncertainties about ourselves, which of course we still have. A reality that we weren't sure was real, we weren't sure what was right, what was wrong. We were looking to adults, we didn't always get the best advice. Questions we asked as children about what was real and what was not. And now, of course, we're in this strange time where truth itself seems to have been eclipsed. In 2017, Peter McIndoe was attending a rally of some sort, supporting some cause. This was not unlike the year we're in now. He noticed that everyone seemed to have a placard with 3 words on it. A little something to say about what they were protesting for or protesting against. And he thought that was funny, and he didn't have a placard, and he looked up at the sky and he saw these birds flying. So he grabbed a cardboard from someone who had extra cardboard and a marker, and he wrote down, "Birds aren't real." And then he started chanting it. Birds aren't real. Birds aren't real. And people turn towards him, and eventually someone comes up to him and goes, "You know, you're right, birds aren't real." And then he went farther with his satire and he said, "Yeah, pigeons, right? Have you actually seen a baby pigeon?" No. No, pigeons are actually government robots that are surveying us all the time. And the guy said, "Yeah, and the wires they land on, that's where they get their energy and they download data to the deep state." And pretty soon he was off, organizing rallies across the country. It was a national movement. Thousands of people coming out for Birds Aren't Real. Now, he knew, of course, that it was a parody, and a lot of other people knew it was a parody, but not everyone believed it was a parody. Many people believed it was true. Conspiracy theorists began to use this as a meme for the deep state they imagined, and it was starting to get dangerous. So after several years, Peter McIndoe announced it was all made up. Of course birds are real. What, are you crazy? Some refuse to believe him to this day. With this kind of take on truth, how are we going to build a bridge to a new world we imagine where we don't even know what truth really is? What do we see as a way through that? And part of how I think that bridge will be built has to do with an entire generation who is learning to use the lies against themselves. What Birds Aren't Real is it's a parody social movement with a purpose. In the post-truth world dominated by online conspiracy theories, young people have coalesced around the effort to thumb their nose at and fight and poke fun at misinformation. It's Gen Z's attempt to upend the rabbit hole with absurdism. As Peter McIndoe put it so, for the members of Gen Z, the movement has become a way to collectively grapple with these experiences. By cosplaying conspiracy theorists, they have found community and kinship. Birds Aren't Real is not a shallow satire of conspiracies from the outside. It's a way for us to cope about this from the inside. And a lot of people in our generation feel the lunacy in all this. And Birds Aren't Real has been a way for people to process that lunacy. Wow. Rilke said in his poem, "Miracle does not lie only in the amazing living through and defeat of danger. Miracles become miracles in the clear achievement that is earned." Beloveds, don't sell the future short. There is wonder here enough for us to pass through the danger and hold up what is really real. What is the achievement of our lives, which is built on the small things that we do day in and day out to help other people? That's real. I thought this week of President Carter. I shook Jimmy Carter's hand in 1976, the college campus that I was on in Iowa. That's why he was there. He was just getting started. And I remember his warmth, and I remember his calm, and I remember the way that he, with that southern accent of his, just made you feel as if it was going to be okay. You could put on the sweater and turn down the thermostat, right? And while he only served one term as president, it's what he's done with the rest of his life that matters. Through that life, he spoke to a moral imagination that went far beyond politics, far beyond expediency. That compassion and that peace, those are his timeless values that he has left whole generations of people with. It has stuck to us bright and purely granted. And that week, this last week, as his body lay and stayed in the Capitol, hundreds talked about his compassion and humility, and many who were in their 20s. One young woman said, he was a role model for my generation. This is the same generation that said, birds aren't real? There is more to us than conspiracy theories. Do not get lost in that. We are still on the winged energy of delight. Instead of asking how we might change the world, friends, I'd like to start with what will we change the world into? The philosopher Peter Block said, too often when a discussion is dominated by questions of how, we risk overvaluing what is practical and doable and postpone the question of the larger purpose and the collective truth. We do this at the expense of pursuing intention and pursuing imagination that arises from within ourselves. Unless you think all that I'm talking about here just doesn't fit reasonable Unitarian Universalists, there was a little bit of a chat last week about what's reason and what's faith. I'd remind you that our music director over there hosts a podcast called Unreasonable. You ought to listen to it. He's got some amazing people on there, young people that are actually changing the world. And I'd also remind you that Emily Dickinson and Buckminster Fuller and Kurt Vonnegut were all unreasonable UUs. And then count among us here, dancers, poets. The open mic night was fabulous. So many poets. I didn't know. Now I know, and now I'll call you. Musicians and cooks and caretakers and people who count the money and make sure the bills get paid, along with engineers, teachers, and creators of all kinds. Our faith, indeed this church, is holding up those astonishing bridges right now. Can you hear me? Yes. And while we might lose sight of how good we are at what we're doing right now, I'd only ask that at times when you feel like this is all hopeless and I can't even turn on the news anymore, remember the millions and millions of acts of kindness that are happening around us all the time that actually makes the world work. And we are all this original blessing of creation, as the theologian Matthew Fox would say. We are all blessed. It's in that blessing that we live. We are not alone, friends. We are in the wake of an emergent movement that is creating a spiritual renewal, and I know that sounds almost impossible right now to believe, but it is actually happening. Because I pay attention to what happens in religious organizations across the country, and many of them are moving beyond the dogmatic, hardline understanding to something more inclusive that wants to build bridges between faith communities. Change is all around us, even though George Carlin said if you put $1 in a change machine, nothing really changes but the money. But I know this. I know that the miracles happen. I talked about this a few weeks ago. Day by day, and the uninspiring work of caring and carrying on, the miracle and the clear achievement that is earned, that Rilke is talking about, lies in those actions. You never know what you do or say can help other people. I remember many years ago talking to a young man after the service. He was clearly distraught. He'd never been to this church before. I didn't know who he was. He asked if I could speak to him. We went into the office and we talked. He told me about his pain, about losing his girlfriend, about his struggle with drugs and alcohol and hopelessness. I told him, as I often do, to folks into situations like that, I said, you were put on this earth for a purpose. You have a calling. You just haven't heard it all yet. You're still looking for it. Tell me what you love to do, I asked him, and he said, well, I like building things. I used to work as a journeyman building houses. I said, there's the miracle. And so we prayed, and he left, and I never saw him again. And years later, I got a Christmas card with a picture of him and his new wife and their infant daughter in front of a house. You may not remember me, he wrote, but I want you to know you saved my life. I was going to commit suicide that day, but I didn't. I got help. I got into AA. I got married, and now I have this small construction business. Thank you and Merry Christmas. It's not hyperbole for me to say that we are here to save lives. I mean that literally. Perhaps not at this level, but there are people who walk through our doors who are looking for something that they can't find anyplace else, and they are coming here for the first time because there's been a tragedy in their life, or they're lost in the hopelessness of what seems to be happening to us around the nation, around Los Angeles burning. Rilke put it this way, he said, to work with things is not hubris when building the association beyond words. Denser and denser the pattern becomes, being carried along is not enough. You have to do something. And our work with Family Promise and UU Justice PA and the many other organizations is really about building that denser pattern, that weaving in the reawakening of a dream in our congregation in these times, these challenging times such as ours. Friends, this is important. No matter how you can help. And this spring, starting with the Earth herself, starting today, we're launching an environmental justice initiative here. Join us after the service here in the main meeting room to learn more about what this will be about. And in the meantime, thrilled to announce an all-congregational read, Nature's Best Hope by Douglas Tallamy. The books will be available in the atrium after the service at a discounted price, thanks to the publisher. I'd like you all to read it. I'm going to read it. In fact, I started reading it. It's a good book. You see, Unitarian Universalism itself is transforming around us all the time. This congregation is in the midst of that transformation, less concerned about how we're different from other religions. I don't really care about that anymore. I'm more interested about how we're the same. And wouldn't it be something if we all stopped beating the drums of war for our side and actually reached across the chasm to the other? Found out that all feel pain, all worry, and all need love. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Rumi said, out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. Wouldn't it be something? Wouldn't it be something if we were the church that was known for reaching out across the divide, that was beyond these walls, as we had in our opening reading this morning? 30 years ago, as a young father, when Francis and I returned to this faith in a little fellowship in the Hudson River Valley, a lay group that prided itself on this do-it-yourself approach to religion. We rolled up our sleeves, we went to work, cooking, cleaning, teaching, leading worship. And it was in that little church that we first heard, and I say we because it was both of us, first heard that call to ministry. The chores haven't changed, friends. The dishes still need doing. Jack Kornfield put it best when he said, after the laundry, the ecstasy. Or after the ecstasy, the laundry. The bold reality is the work is still there. Previous generations did it. Our generation will do it. And we will reinvent ourselves. The miracles don't lie in the defeat of danger, but in the clear achievement of what has been earned. To harness new technology, new media, new ways of relating to each other. We are keeping on in a new way, and we are learning about it as time goes by. And it's not that one way is better than another, and I wish we did it this way, and we're doing it this way. Hey, go on with the ride. Hang with it. Go. Just see what happens. Learn to text. Or like me, text. My thumbs aren't quite as opposable as they need to be, I suppose. I mean, just this last week, I saw people reaching out to one another about someone having a terrible diagnosis. I saw people reaching out to somebody who was dealing with the loss of someone close to them. This is what it means to carry on the faith. This is the new way that we awaken ourselves in new ways to the same work that we've been doing all along. And that, in doing that, and we learning new ways to do it, we are embracing change. Rilke wrote, take your well-disciplined strengths and stretch them between two opposing poles, because inside human beings is where God lives. I've always believed this. I've always believed that God is in the gap between two people, in the relationship that we make with one another, not in some place out there, but some place in here. Listen, friends, this is the time of rage and hope. Rage and hope. The rage is real. It's real for many of us, corporations who've amassed more power and money, more information, more of our lives are monetized than ever before. You can't talk to a human being in customer service without an hour-long wait unless they want to sell you something. Am I right? I tried to find something the other day and the AI just kept tripping me up. Nope, you can't talk to a real human being. Your concern does not rise to that monetized level that we're looking for. Thank you very much. I wish they'd just be honest about it. And that strange sympathy for the killer of the United Healthcare CEO. And while we all think that's wrong, it points to the frustration so many are feeling. It's just amazing what we're dealing with. And the hope, I'll talk about more of this next week, but the hope is in the strength that comes from those two opposing poles, individuals and community. That might be a pole to pole. Young and old might be a pole to pole. Stretched, but still connected. A few weeks ago, someone who I will not name came up to me and said, I'm getting really frustrated with all these changes around here. We chatted for a bit, and then finally she said, well, I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to get us to grow spiritually even if we don't want to. Yeah, something like that. This is the stretching, the natural tension you're feeling. It's a good thing. It's a good thing because that's the bridge we cross upon. We cross inside that tension. It will not always be comfortable. It will upset some of you. But sometimes change feels like falling. But we're not falling. We're transforming. And we don't do this alone. Nor will we only do it here. We will do it much more on the outside. Because whether it's words or dance or music or touch, the story, the action, the cooking, the holding, or just being, this is why we are here. God, such as she is right here between us, posed in these poles, pulling us, stretching us to be those astonishing bridges. I know we can do this. And I hope you will join me. Amen.